Western gaming studios are getting absolutely demolished by Eastern ones in 2025, and that's for good reason. Politics have seeped their way into every facet of our culture and has destroyed what made games great as an escape from reality. Once the dominant forces in gaming, studios like EA, Ubisoft, and Activision have been failing to keep up with the ever-evolving opinions of players. Unfortunately, they've mostly ignored those opinions as they only ever really gone after whatever they believe will make them the most money. This is adversely against players' interests and, of course, results in their stock prices plummeting, most of their games flopping, and a player exodus like never before to Eastern developers who are delivering the quality experiences that gamers actually want. So the question isn't if Western game studios will collapse, it's when. Today, these same studios are defined by their failures: broken games, predatory monetization that tries to drive impulse spending, and an obsession with DEI that has alienated their core audiences. The shift in these priorities is what has mostly taken shape for the industry. Because of previous successes from titles like Fortnite and PUBG, studios are outputting live service skin seller simulators on a massive scale. I also think this is a major reason much of the soul of video games has been taken out, as every company is battling to build the next battle royale or hero shooter. They're most focused on delivering a half-baked product that can attract an audience with high-fidelity graphics and essentially become a money-making machine without having to do any of the effort required to make an actual standalone evergreen game. On the other hand, Eastern developers have been on the rise, delivering the kinds of games that prioritize gameplay, immersion, and respect for the player. Games like Black Myth Wukong and Monster Hunter Wilds aren't just competing with Western titles, they're destroying them in every possible metric. Over the last couple of months, we've seen the massive success and retention of players in the live service hero shooter Marvel Rivals, made by the Chinese studio NetEase. So how did this all happen? How did some of these quote-unquote knockoffs become better than the originals? Well, let's start with Ubisoft, a company that's gone from being a juggernaut in the industry to a punchline. These guys just can't seem to catch a break. Their stock price has been in a nosedive for years, and the recent quadruple A releases have been nothing but catastrophic failures. Early in 2024, they dropped Skull and Bones, an open-world pirate and naval warfare game that was 10 years in the making and was supposed to topple Microsoft Sea of Thieves. Instead, it ended up launching to lukewarm reviews, giving it an average score of 6 out of 10. What was supposed to be a service to fans of Assassin's Creed Black Flag turned into a nightmare. Gamers took control of a minimally customizable pirate ship in a massive ocean that had little to no real life, with options to play online or single player. Riddled with microtransactions, the game's content was almost non-existent, and it was mocked heavily for the swarm of glitches and the lackluster experience that plagued it. These troubles led to poor player retention. Estimates put the abysmal sales figure for the game at around 1 million units sold, nowhere close to what Ubisoft was expecting. On Steam, the numbers look even scarier, as there are currently only 110 players online at the time of this recording. The game no doubt cost over $200 million to produce and has become nothing but a meme for Ubisoft haters. And what's even funnier is that Ubisoft believed in this game's success so much that they had partnered with Atlas Entertainment in 2019 to adapt Skull and Bones into a live-action, female-driven pirate drama TV show set during the golden age of piracy. It was just hilarious to see Ubisoft start the year off with such a massive failure. A game that was supposed to be the future of the company has done nothing but dig a hole in the ground. And this game wouldn't be the only scare for Ubisoft's executives in 2024, as they also released another major flop with Star Wars Outlaws just a couple of months later. Another game marketed as a quadruple A title ended up being yet another massively empty open world plagued by glitches. Star Wars Outlaws underperformed so badly that Ubisoft had to crawl back to Steam, listing their games on the platform for the first time in 5 years. Essentially, they tossed out their own storefront in a desperate attempt to reach a wider audience, but the game was poorly received by both fans and critics, earning scores in the 6 to 7 out of 10 range. Players got to control the snarky boss female Kay Vess, a scoundrel and thief traversing open-world environments on different planets and in space, while also engaging in various missions within a lackluster story about building a new life for the protagonist. But in true Ubisoft fashion, the game was marred by glitches, and non-stop compilation videos were posted to YouTube, further dragging down its reputation. This game's sales numbers were estimated at around 1 million units, a massive underperformance for a title that cost hundreds of millions to make, not to mention the hefty licensing fees associated with the Star Wars IP. This failure has sent the company into a downward spiral, to the point where it has lost over 80% of its stock value. This wasn't just a failure, it was the domino that set Ubisoft on the dark path it's currently on. Now, all of Ubisoft's hopes rest on their most important upcoming release, Assassin's Creed Shadows. Another quadruple A game, it has already seen its development delayed twice. While delays could signal that Ubisoft is taking time to reflect on past feedback, it could just as easily point to internal struggles. AC Shadows is set to be the 14th installment in the franchise and will take place in feudal Japan. Players will take control of 2 protagonists, Naoi, a female shinobi, and Yasuke, an African samurai inspired by the historical figure of the same name. The game's trailers and teasers have already been criticized for their endless historical inaccuracies, the site being crafted by Ubisoft's so-called highly qualified experts. This has raised questions about the validity of the game's promises to deliver an exceptional open-world feudal Japan experience. To make matters worse, AC Shadows will be competing with the next Ghost of Tsushima game, also set to release later this year, and that spells trouble for Ubisoft, as Sony, an actual Japanese company that understands and respects the culture, will be developing it. If AC Shadow flops, and let's be honest, the odds aren't great, it could spell the end of Ubisoft as we know it. With their stock at record lows, the company bleeding money, and their reputation in tatters, everything is riding on AC Shadows to be a success. It's really starting to look like Ubisoft is verging on bankruptcy. There was a time when Ubisoft was one of the biggest names in gaming, a powerhouse that set trends and delivered iconic experiences. But today, the company is struggling to keep up with gamers, with reports suggesting they're drowning in debts exceeding $2.7 billion. I think much of Ubisoft's shortcomings boil down to them rehashing and re-releasing the same games every year, causing fans to grow fatigued with their formulaic style. And that brings me to yet another studio whose players have been frustrated with them selling the same games year after year. Electronic Arts, another company that plays it safe and churns out the same game every year, has somehow managed to alienate almost every segment of its audience. Madden and FIFA fans are tired of paying $70 for what amounts to a roster update to their favorite games. With the advancements in graphics and performance during the PS5 era, almost all of their sports games are carbon copies of the last, with minor changes like extra sweat or improved shadows. But most people have caught on to EA's games and fewer players are buying these games each year. It's more like you buy one and you're set for the next 2 to 3 years. When they're not just rehashing old games, they're releasing massive flops like Dragon Age the Veilguard, the fourth installment in the Dragon Age franchise and a sequel to the masterpiece that was Inquisition. Veilguard failed to meet fans' expectations. Costing more than $250 million to develop and taking over 10 years to make, the game was rife with lengthy delays, several fundamental design changes, and high staff turnover. The game also faced heavy controversy in the months leading up to its release over topics like gender ideology and DEI influences. These concerns proved to be true for many gamers as the story heavily emphasized pronouns and inclusivity training. Ultimately, it would sell around 1.5 million copies, an underperformance that caused EA's stock price to take a dive. And honestly, I think this is a good thing. EA stopped innovating years ago, instead relying on microtransactions, battle passes, and other predatory practices to squeeze every penny out from their players. They've completely given up on delivering games like the Dead Space remake, which in their minds was a failure because it wasn't a live service game selling virtual goods. They even rejected proposals for a revival of the franchise and a remake of the second game. EA also has no interest in making a sequel to Jedi Survivor, rejecting a proposal for a third installment into the franchise. Now, they're scrambling to figure out their next move. Player fatigue with their games and relentless microtransactions have been driving people away, similar to another company, Activision and Blizzard. The company that once delivered the best shooter games in the industry is now experiencing a mass exodus of players. Call of Duty has seen a significant decline. Despite Black Ops 6 being announced as the best Call of Duty launch in years, the game now has an abysmal 30% player retention rate. This is due to overwhelming glitches, bugs, and the rampant presence of hackers. Once the go-to first-person shooter, Call of Duty has become a shadow of its former itself, with a steady decline in players year after year. But because the game still prints money with its endless gun camos and operator skins, Activision has shown little care in fixing these issues. Now, it seems like players are finally waking up and leaving Call of Duty for Eastern games. This exodus also impacts Overwatch 2. Players are abandoning Call of Duty and Overwatch for Marvel Rivals, the NetEase live service game that has completely swallowed Activision's audience. And that's for a good reason. NetEase is delivering creative, fun, and novel experiences. Overwatch for a long time dominated the hero shooter genre, which led to stagnant updates and unpopular changes that left players dissatisfied. The saturated market ensured most players stuck with their chosen game, stagnating growth in the genre and allowing Activision to rake in most of the profits. With the release of Marvel Rivals, however, players are leaving these games in record numbers. The cracks in Activision Blizzard's empires are impossible to ignore. Their reliance on nostalgia and cash grabs proves they're out of touch with their core audience. This further demonstrates that Western game studios have lost what made games great. Most of these studios are stuck, clinging to business models that prioritize short-term profits over long-term success. Microtransactions, battle passes, and live service models dominate their releases, making every game feel like a chore rather than an escape. Players are sick and tired of being nickel and dimed for content that should have been included in the base game. Another big issue plaguing these studios is their obsession with political messaging. Instead of creating engaging games, these companies have turned their titles into platforms for social commentary. While there's nothing inherently wrong with telling stories that address real-world issues, the execution has been heavy-handed and off-putting. It feels more like lecturing, telling players they're bad people, rather than letting us experience what the characters are going through. At the heart of these problems is corporate mismanagement. These companies are more focused on pleasing their shareholders than their players. This has created a culture of rushed releases, broken games, and a complete disregard for what their audiences actually want. The decline of Western studios and the rise of Eastern developers is a wake-up call for the gaming industry. Players are voting with their wallets, and they're choosing quality over corporate greed. Let's hope the success of Eastern studios inspires a new era of amazing and fun AAA gaming. Well, That's all I have for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. I appreciate you guys for making it to the end, and as always, have a good one.